All right, can everyone see this preview?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. All righty, so here's just a little overview of what we will be working on today. If your little boxes from the Zoom meeting are in the way, feel free to drag it down to the bottom or minimize it so that it doesn't block your view. But just a quick overview of the agenda. We'll do some quick introductions and then talk about 350, our mission statement and history, and a little introduction to the legislative process, a quick overview for you all. Our plans as 350 for the 2023 legislative session. We have a guest speaker, Mike Foote, to share the legislator experience with you all, and then some citizen lobbying info, story of self, and breakout rooms. Will just be a really quick way to connect and practice what we're learning. Another guest speaker, Lucy Molina, on environmental justice and story of self. And then we'll just talk about our process this legislative session with the bill topic teams and lobby corps, how you can get involved, how you can plug in, and what role you might want to play in it. And then we'll talk about some priority bills that we will be focusing on with 350 this session, and then some other bills that we're excited about, and how to read a bill, and then Q&A. So we've got a lot going on. So just to introduce ourselves, the legislative action team at 350, I'm Alyssa Firestone, the Promoting Climate Solutions Coordinator. Very nice to meet you. I've met a lot of you already. And I will let Valley and Meg introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. I'm Valley Lopez, also the Promoting Climate Solutions Coordinator, and we'll be kind of transitioning into Alyssa's role in the next couple months. So excited to be here and share this info and get to know some of you. And I'll pass it over to you, Meg.
Hi, my name's Meg. I am a legislative intern with 350 Colorado, getting my master's of social work with a focus in ecological justice. So excited to focus on climate policies that are involved in ecological justice.
Thank you, Meg. All right, so looks like we have a couple of things in the chat. Yes, it is definitely okay to use this recording to educate and inform your groups. We will be sending it out afterwards, more on that and later, but yeah, like Scott did, feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. We'll do that right now as well. So just to get to know everyone, there's a lot of us here, so we won't really have time to go around and check in with everyone, but if you are able to introduce yourself in the chat, just say your name, anything you would like to share, and then as a practice for learning how to do this, as well as a way to kind of get to know who is where in the state and so that we can kind of divide everyone moving forward into constituent groups. If you could go to Google Find My Legislator Colorado and type in the chat with your introduction who your legislator is. And there is a link to that as well. Valley, are you able to share that link? Since I'm sharing, I don't have it on my.
Yep, I'll go grab it. Give me 1 second.
Thank you. So yeah, you can also find it by just Googling Find My Legislator Colorado. It's just a fun way for us to get to know where we all are and get to know who your legislator is. Oh, Jenny shared it. Thank you, Jenny. So yeah, we'll just let everyone kind of filter that in there, and we will be recording it for future use. So thank you so much for doing that and letting us gauge where everyone is. But for now, we'll move on as you all do that. But keep an eye on the chat so we can get to know each other. All righty, so now we will do the land acknowledgement. And Valley, this is you. Sorry, I sent you on a mission right before your.
No, it's all good. It looks like it got put in the chat. I'll go ahead and just post it again here just so people can see that. Really appreciate that information. It just helps us connect you to the proper legislator and make sure we're doing our work effectively. So thanks to everyone for throwing that in the chat. Yeah, just wanted to, before we kick things off, start off with a land acknowledgement. This is really important to us at 350 Colorado. So I'm just going to go ahead and read this paragraph here. Let us acknowledge with deep respect that the lands upon which we gather today are the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Ute, Cheyenne, Arapaho, Apache, Comanche, Osage, and Kiowa nations and peoples. We respect the indigenous stewards of this land, past, present, and future. We remember the painful history of genocide and forced removal under settler colonialism and commit ourselves to dismantling structures that perpetuate this legacy and the status quo. As these words of acknowledgement are spoken, may they reaffirm the ties of all indigenous peoples of over 48 historic tribes to these unceded lands we call Colorado. Awesome. And then I just wanted to flag, we have quite a few people in the chat. It looks like we're in the meeting about 50 now. And we just kindly ask people as they join to please go on mute just to avoid any feedback or anything like that. So thank you. I think Chelsea is next up.
Thank you, Valley. Hello, everyone. My name's Chelsea Alexander. I use she, her, pronouns. I'm the Movement Building and Volunteer Director with 350 Colorado, and I have the easiest job here tonight, which is just getting to talk very briefly about 350 Colorado. I see so many familiar faces here from last year, and my cheeks are hurting from smiling. So welcome back to the 2023 General Assembly. For all the new faces and names I don't recognize, I am so excited to get to know you more over the coming weeks, and I'm ready to support you in being the best climate activist you can be, in whatever that way that looks like for you. So yeah, just briefly here, 350 Colorado, we're working to build the local grassroots movement to solve the climate crisis and transition to a sustainable future. So pretty big, lofty goal and vision, but seeing this many people coming together too on the first night of the legislative session is very inspiring and uplifting, because policy is a very big way that we show up in the climate movement. It's not the only way. Here you see our 3 pillars of action, what we think of as our theory of change. So that first one there, building a powerful grassroots movement, that's something that is very, of course, near and dear to me in my role, and getting to know each and every one of you and your strengths and the way that you want to show up to the movement is something I'm really looking forward to, as I know other staff and other folks are on the call here. So staying local and focusing on the local, and of course, for tonight, that is also statewide when we're talking local, since we're talking about statewide policy. Our second pillar of action is to keep all fossil fuels in the ground. And this is also an ambitious goal. And in the meantime, we are working towards very strong regulation, complete accountability from oil and gas operators and regulatory agencies that are holding them accountable and doing the good work. But a complete phase out by 2030 would be grand. And as our last pillar of action, promoting a just and equitable future and a just and equitable transition for communities and people as we move away from extractive industries and towards a renewable, sustainable future. So policy and legislative action is really cool because it encompasses all these things. It's both promoting solutions and keeping fossil fuels in the ground. So very, very cool way to show up to the movement. And as my last notes here, we could spend a whole entire hour and a half plus just talking about the climate crisis. So we try to keep it really high level because the focus of tonight is legislative advocacy. So just these 3 quick points here. That first section there on the left, 350 means climate safety to us. That number comes from the parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, CO2. That's a limit that was set by scientists as a safe upper limit. Unfortunately, currently today, we're closer to 420 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere, and we're seeing a rise of 2 to 3 points roughly each year. So this is a boundary that we definitely need to work our way to get back underneath to stay safe and have a livable planet. And we know that Colorado, as many of us have lived here probably our entire lives, or I've called this place home in the last so many years. We've felt or know people that have felt the impacts of climate change here. Severe droughts, heat waves, record-breaking frigid temperatures just a few weeks ago, disrupting infrastructure that wasn't prepared for such severity. Snowpack decline. Thankfully, we're not seeing that so much right now, but this time last year and just before was very much so an issue. So Colorado is a really unique state in the nation, just experiencing a variety of ways that climate is changing. And I just want to take a personal moment to send my heart out to anyone that's just lived through these climate impacts or know people that have, especially those that are experiencing at a disproportionate rate, whether it's a community of lower income, a community of color, Black, Indigenous, children, elders. There's a variety of groups differently able to chronically ill, global south, and threatened and endangered non-human species. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are many of the groups that face the brunt of the climate crisis and its impacts first and foremost, while simultaneously doing the least to contribute to it. And that's part of how we have to show up in the work that we do and how we show up to one another to make sure we're lifting the voices of those impacted, hearing from community leaders that are doing the work, and knowing that we can work hand in hand and commit to self-transformation as a way to build not just a better future, but one that's really just based in justice and equity and is accessible to everybody. So yeah, with that, I will pass it over to Meg. But again, I'm so excited to keep working with all of y'all and see what this session has in store for all of us.
Thank you, Chelsea. So we thought it was important to give an overview of the legislative process because it can be a bit confusing for those of us that aren't working in policy or in legislature. So we'll get started here. If you could go to the next slide, Alyssa. So first, an overview of the Colorado General Assembly, which follows a very similar structure to the federal level. We have the House of Representatives, which has 65 members, and the number of representatives are based on population. Those are 2-year-long terms. And then in the Senate, we have 35 members. The number is not based on population, and those are 4-year terms. The legislative session starts today, woohoo! And then it will go towards early to mid-May, and that can vary a bit year to year. Next slide. So stage 1, before a bill is introduced, a lot happens leading up to the legislative session before bills are even introduced. First, the bill concept is formed the year before the session. Constituents and groups can meet with legislators to influence bill concepts, and then representatives or senators decide to be the bill's prime sponsor. A bill drafter is assigned and drafts the bill together with the legislature. And then all bills are either introduced before the session starts or within the first month of the session. All right, stage 2, a bill is introduced. So the first reading will happen either in the House or the Senate, depending on who the sponsor is. And then once the bill is read, the speaker assigns the bill to 1 or 2 committees of reference. The committees that take on the bills that we're really interested in here at 350 are mainly the Energy and Environment Committee in the House and the Transportation and Energy Committee in the Senate. Next slide. So stage 3 is the committee hearings and readings. So committee hearings are open to the public, and this is where public testimony occurs. The public testimony typically happens in person. However, in some cases, remote testimony is available, and the public can also listen in to committee hearings online if they wish as well. So amendments are also added in these committee hearings, and then a bill can pass to another committee if it's assigned to multiple committees. And then if the bill has a fiscal impact, it will go to the Appropriations Committee as well. After The bill passes in those committees. It then enters a second reading, which is read to the committee as the whole. Legislators can also offer additional amendments then. And then the third reading consists of the final vote of approval for the chamber. Only technical amendments may be added in this section. So after a bill is passed in the first chamber, it goes on to the chamber and undergoes the same process there. If the second chamber offers amendments, the original chamber can either adopt or reject amendments or call for a conference committee to be formed. The conference committee suggests compromises as amendments to the bill, and then both chambers work together to find agreements. Also, just to note, at any stage after the first reading, a bill can be killed. All right, next slide. So if a bill passes the third reading in both chambers, the bill goes to the governor. The governor can either sign the bill into law, veto it, or the bill automatically becomes a law after 30 days if it's not signed, which has happened quite a bit over the past couple of years. If the governor doesn't sign it, it'll just automatically become a law. If the bill is vetoed, the legislator can override the veto with a 2-to-3 majority vote from both parties, from both chambers. If the General Assembly has adjourned, there's no really opportunity for an override in that session. And that kind of wraps up just what the bill goes through and just a general, very brief overview of the legislative process on how a bill becomes a law. So I will pass it over to Alyssa.
Sorry about that. It wasn't giving me the unmute. Okay, and I just wanted to remind everyone, thank you so much, Meg, for that wonderful overview. Reminding everyone to share your legislators in the chat if you can. I just added the link again. This is just super helpful for us moving forward, so we know where you're all from and how to reach out and the rest of the legislative session. So I will keep sharing. Can you all see this? Okay, good. So I just wanted to do a pretty brief overview of our plans for the 2023 legislative advocacy internally with 350 Colorado and externally with the schedule. So here are some key dates and periods that we have. Let's see, we still have Meg on for some reason, but so January through early February, we are hoping that you'll be really inspired after this meeting to schedule a get to know you meeting with your legislator. That was another big reason we wanted you to share it in the chat so that you, if you don't already know them or know who they are, you do now, and you can be inspired to reach out and just tell them you want to get to know them. We'll have more info on how to do that and why it's so important later. January 9th is today. The legislative session begins. Yay, it's a big day. And we're having this meeting. So every other Monday moving forward from now, we will have a legislative and action committee meeting. Many of you have already been joining those meetings. They've been monthly during the non-legislative session, and then they'll move to every other week. So hopefully you can join those in the little triangles. We'll share lots of updates on bills that we're following, opportunities to testify, and just kind of collaborate together on what's going on in the legislative session and climate legislation. So on February 5th through 10th, we'll be doing another big launch of this year's session with Climate Lobby Week. So this will be a great time for you to hopefully meet with your legislator in person at the Capitol. If you're not able to get to Denver and meet with them in person at the Capitol, then you can, of course, schedule an online meeting or hopefully join another meeting that is in person online. But we will be doing a launch on the 5th to kind of go over that week and how to schedule a constituent meeting. And then on February 10th in the morning from 8 to noon, more or less, we'll be doing another overview of those meetings and the bills we're focusing on. We'll have a lot more information on them at that point in time, and looking at our priority bills and how to talk to your legislators about them, why you support them, and all of that wonderful, fun stuff. So that will be our big climate lobby day of the session. And then moving forward, we'll continue with those every other week meetings. So now we will have Mike Foote come on for a little bit of why it's important to meet with your legislators and build a relationship from his perspective.
Oh, okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for being here. Hopefully everyone can hear me, but if not, just let me know. And I'm happy to be here. My name is Mike Foote. I'm a former legislator. I was in the legislature from 2012 to 2020. I was in the House for 6 of those years and then in the Senate for 2 of those years. And so I have a little experience being on the receiving end of the asks of the requests. And so I was hoping to maybe give you just a couple minutes of an overview of how you can be most effective when you're speaking with your legislators at the state level in order to try to get some good policy passed. And there's really 2 main areas that I would love for you to, 2 main concepts, I guess I should say, 2 main concepts I'd love for you to take away from my little part of this talk. Just 2. Number 1 is that the state capitol is not the same thing as Congress. You all know that, but it's also much more approachable and things actually get done a lot more than in Congress. So the state legislature is not Congress. And number 2, that legislators are people too. So the state legislature is not Congress and legislators are people too. Those are really the 2 things I hope you can take away from this. And it will help you if you keep that in mind when you're seeking to speak with your legislator to get good policy passed. So first, just a little bit of a further explanation about how the state legislature is not Congress. I mean, obviously, you all know you don't have to go through a lesson in how government works, but just kind of the way that the 2 institutions work and also their approachability and how things get done are just completely different. I think some folks assume that legislatures all kind of work the same, and that's just not the case. For one, the legislators at the state capitol are generally much more accessible than those that are in Congress for many reasons. I mean, of course, in Congress, you've got folks that are in DC for most of the week, so that's a problem. But secondly, you know, the legislative districts in the state are just much smaller generally, geographically and population wise, than Congress. Members of Congress usually represent about 750,000 people, give or take. In the state legislature, your state representative typically represents about 75,000 and your state senator represents double that, so about 150,000. So of those in the state legislature, 75,000 in the state house, 150,000 in the state senate, there's probably only a handful, maybe a couple of dozen of those constituents that are actually pretty active in state legislative politics and policy. So if you think about that, I mean, you could be one of, say, 25 people in the district that really are active, that talk with your state legislator, and they can personally meet with the state legislator, go to their events and those kinds of things. There's just not that many. I mean, there's overwhelming amount of communication, emails, particularly stock emails that go out to state legislators. But as far as personal communications and people from the district that personally know the legislator well and can speak to them on a first name basis, there's just not that many. So if you are able to get into that category, you're going to be in a great spot. And it's not that hard to get into that category as well. So I just wanted to say that first and foremost, that you can do it. It's a lot different and a lot easier than trying to be in the category of the dozen or so people that the congressperson relies upon that they talk to in DC. That's really hard. A lot easier to do it at the state level. At the state level, many times constituent ideas actually become bills, and many times those bills actually can pass. So it's just not the kind of overwhelming process where you think there's no way that you could get your idea could turn into a federal law. It's not like that at the state level at all. There's certainly a number of complicated bills that ended up being proposed and some that pass. But a lot of those consist of constituent ideas. And at the very least, constituent support from those kind of 24 or so constituents in each district that are super active in that particular district. So the scale of it is less, the possibility is more. It just is possible if you can put in some effort and you have the time to put into it to really make a difference at the state capitol. It's just a lot harder to do it at the US Capitol at Congress. At the state capitol also, just to note, it's different than Congress. It's already been said before that the state legislature only meets for 4 months out of the year. That's in the Constitution. So they can't meet any more than that, absent a small special session that occurs maybe once every 3 or 4 years for various reasons. And so it's a 120-day calendar. Things get introduced, passed or not, in that 120 days, and they move quickly. Just like human nature is, a lot of the big things don't actually really start moving until the second half of the session when there's this deadline that's looming. But the deadline's a hard deadline. It has to happen 120 days after the legislature starts. And so things do happen very, very quickly, especially during the second half of the session. So you just have to know that things can come up kind of on a moment's notice, and they can be decided quite quickly. And if you have a level of flexibility, you can play a role in those kinds of decisions, but they could occur at committee hearings at 11 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock in the morning. It just kind of depends, particularly in the last part of session. So you just have to keep that in mind. Going on to the second part, which is that legislators are people too. It's just important to keep that in mind, that what you do and how you approach relationships on a human level with everybody else in your life, or people that you do business with, those types of things apply to legislators too, particularly legislators in the state legislature. You know, most of these folks are, they're all part-time legislators, or they are in the legislature part-time, although the work of the legislature typically goes on during the entire year, but they're in session part-time. But many of them have jobs outside of session. They're normal people. They're elected, but they have other professions. And so you just have to know that they're just regular, ordinary people. They just happen to put their name on the ballot and wanted to serve in this particular capacity. So, just the lessons that you have learned throughout your life about how to be nice to people and try not to burn bridges. Those types of things apply to legislators as well. You know, with legislators, they take, at the state legislature here, they'll take 1,000 votes every session, and you're not likely to agree with all 1,000 of those votes. You could agree with 950 of those votes, which would be a really good percentage that you agree, but you're not going to agree with all of them. That doesn't mean that you're going to disagree with them on climate stuff or things that are important to you, but you just have to not create the unrealistic expectation that in order for you to feel like that they're doing a good job representing you, that you have to agree with them 100% of the time, because that's just not really possible. But for the most part, particularly with some of the legislators that I saw that were put into the chat, they're going to agree with you in concept on the climate crisis. And so you're going to find a sympathetic ear with many of them that were listed there on the chat. And that's the good news. There may be disagreement about specific ways to go about solving it or addressing it or mitigating it. But they're going to agree with you kind of on a deeper level about the need to address it, to mitigate it, to solve it. And so that's a really good start. The means by which it happens, there could be debate that's open to reasonable interpretations. Two people that are reasonable could disagree. That's not really necessarily a reason to just kind of consider them someone that can't come around eventually, or someone that you couldn't approach at a later date with a different idea. Just maybe that particular one may not work, but that's okay. That's human nature. Just as in human nature, the better that you know somebody, that you know their preferences and they know you, the more likely it is that you can have good conversations, candid conversations, they recognize you, and that they'll take your ideas, your substantive ideas into account. So familiarity, showing up at events. Many of the legislators that are listed have pretty regular town halls, although some of them are more virtual than in person nowadays, but that can vary and that can also change. Many of them will have other events too, like community coffees, or they'll show up at public events. And at the community coffees and things like that, you're going to have maybe 10 people that show up to those. At the town halls, you're going to have maybe 30 people that show up to those. So if you show up and you engage constructively and maybe even get a few moments after the fact to chat, introduce yourself, get to know them a little better, then that's going to be to your advantage. So familiarity is something that really helps when it comes to knowing your legislators. And it'll enable you to send a direct email or communication, or when you come to the Capitol, they'll know who you are and you can really engage. I just think that particularly the face-to-face or the substantive direct kind of email as opposed to the email blasts make a huge difference when it comes to trying to get your ideas in front of that legislator and be persuasive as to how they should vote on an issue or what kind of bill they should run or the idea of yours that should turn into a bill. So keep all of that in mind. It takes time, it takes effort, just like any kind of person-to-person relationship with a friend or business acquaintance or whatever. It's not going to probably happen on your first meeting, but it definitely can happen. I can tell you that from personal experience. There were probably, again, about 15 or 20 constituents of mine when I was in office that I would maybe consider to be super constituents, or those that I knew better than the others. And they're ones that I think had a lot of influence on the types of bills that I ran or how I voted on things, and people that I would even randomly call up and ask their opinion proactively about things. And so if you can get into that kind of category, then you're going to be in a good spot. But it takes a little bit of time. But unlike Congress, I would say, it's actually really possible at the state level. So those are really kind of the two main things I was hoping to convey. And maybe you had some questions on the chat. I don't know. I can't really pay attention to the chat and give a presentation at the same time. But I'll see if I can monitor it after if you have any specific questions. But again, state legislature is not Congress. Legislators are people too. You can make a difference. Just put in a little bit of time and be patient with it, and it definitely can make the difference. So thanks again for being here tonight and starting to make your difference. And look forward to helping you all out as 350's lobbyists down at the Capitol. And hopefully we'll see you down there as well, so you can get some personal face time with some of these legislators.
Awesome.
Oh, go ahead, Pally.
Oh, sorry, Alyssa. Didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
Thank
I
you.
was just saying thank you. There you go.
Thank you so much, Mike. Yeah, that's really great to have you here. And I know we just met earlier today, but as you were speaking, I was thinking about, I wanted to share with the group just very briefly that I was an intern at the Capitol and had kind of a different perspective and really want to support the things that Mike said, from Senator Bridges, who I worked with, and just what I saw on my own end with people reaching out and, sending a personal email or, really taking that effort to want to connect with our legislator one-on-one. Often those responses, they came to me as an intern or to the aide, and those did get forwarded on. And often Senator, Bridges would meet, with these, with this constituent. So just wanted to support that and say, there is a lot of email that senators and reps receive that they never see and gets filtered through, the interns and the aides. So those are the ones that can get through. And that's really why we're pushing to, in this group, advocate for, people meeting with their elected officials and having those conversations, because they are very effective. So yeah, just wanted to support that, but I'll go ahead and it's a good segue to move into our topic here on effective citizen lobbying. So really what we want to delve into here is how, we have these conversations with our legislators and to us here at 350, a tool that we think it's really effective is what we call our story of self. You want to go ahead and go to the next slide, please, Alyssa. And some of you have maybe heard about this concept before, but just wanted to touch on it and make sure that we're all aware, because it's a really effective and well-known tactic. And basically what this is this is your personal story and your stake in climate change. And this is the aspect of why you're involved, and why maybe you're here in this meeting today, or why you got involved in the movement to begin with. And some examples of what that could be and what your story of self is centered on is perhaps being personally impacted by environmental events like wildfires, hurricanes, and floods, which I don't think would be a stretch of the imagination to say that all of us have probably been affected in some way in Colorado by those events. But it doesn't have to necessarily be those type of environmental events. It could be experiencing some sort of systemic issue that violates your values. It could have to do with environmental injustice. It could also just be any kind of life-altering event that activated you into being here today and taking action. And just for me personally, it was hiking in Glacier Park and standing next to the largest glacier in the park and thinking about it not being there anymore and possibly shrinking. So that was a powerful event to me. And I bring that up because your personal event does not have to have, this compelling story, that someone wants to make a documentary about. It can just be, meaningful. And if it matters to you and it's important, then that's really the most important thing. And when you take those experiences that are compelling and you share them with other people, you can also bring other people into the movement. So just wanted to stress that. And next slide, please, Alyssa. So just briefly here, I wanted to talk about the three parts of the public narrative. You're crafting, whether you're writing a letter or you're meeting with your legislator in person. And I did touch on the story of self, which again is that personal experience that can't be proven wrong. That's yours. No one can take it away. And what we do when we craft this public narrative is we tie that into the story of us. And that takes your personal story and it draws it out into the larger story of a community and organization, your city. It could even be the whole world. So it's important to illustrate how your own personal story is reflected in the shared purposes and goals of a larger group of people. And then we can take story of self and story of us, and we can draw those into the story of now. And that takes those narratives and it puts them in a time frame of urgency. Like what we're asking for is not something, 2 decades in the future. We're asking for this right now, and that's really important. So when we combine the story of self with the story of us and the story of now, what we've crafted is our public narrative. And I even like to think about this as like your elevator pitch, like something that you've got down that when you go to your legislator, even maybe you're going to a friend or a family member, this is how you talk about why you're involved and why this is important. And as that picture shows, why our future matters. So with that being said, go ahead and go to the next slide, please, Alyssa. What we're going to do now is we're just going to take a brief minute to give y'all a rest from us talking and give you a chance to join a breakout room one-on-one with someone else here and share some of these same things with other people in the meeting. So just want to stress that this is really low key. And if you feel like, you don't have your story of self down yet, it's totally okay. We're going to start off with just a nice and easy icebreaker. And we have a question there. What do you love most about Colorado? You can take a couple minutes to just chat about that. And then you can just, talk about why am I here today? What's maybe an ask that I have of my legislator? And and if you are feeling overwhelmed by that, like I said, just keep it low key, talk about anything that feels real in the moment. And then when we come back, we'll have the opportunity actually to hear from Lucy Molina, who has a really great encapsulation of what a great story of self is. And she'll be able to share that with everyone. And if you're feeling like a little unsure about how to craft it, I would say that she does a really great job of doing that. So I think Alyssa is probably working on putting some of these breakout rooms together. So we're going to take about 5 or 6 minutes to do this. And it should just have something pop up on your screen here in just a few seconds. and it'll put you in a room with someone else. And we'll just have you come back in about 5 or 6 minutes, and we'll continue with our presentation. How's that looking for you, Alyssa?
Great, thank you, Valley. So I just created all the rooms. You should have, looks like people are joining. So yeah, just press join and it'll take you there. No worries if you can't join, you can stay here in the main room and we'll figure out a way to do it here. And it looks like some people are on their phones. And maybe we could put in the chat those questions just so that people have them. We'll work on doing that. All right, let's see. Did everyone that's here not get a breakout room or is not able to join one? Laura, let's see, can I send it to you again? A bit of a new trick for me. Mom.
Sorry, is it possible to get put in a different breakout room? There just wasn't anyone in mine.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, it looks like we might have lost some people. So
All
let
good.
me see.
I was in 5 previously, if that's helpful at all.
Yeah, there you are. Okay, I'm gonna move you to room 6 with those a couple people in there.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. Looks like there are some rooms with people only on their own.
I think I left my breakout room because I was the only one there. So I thought I had clicked on it too soon.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, here, I'm going to add you to a room with a couple of other people.
Yeah.
Anyone else alone?
I was alone in room 4 if you want to add us there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, looks like you and Moshi were both there. So I could either add you both again back there, or let's see if that works. Or I could just add you to a different room. Try that. Did that work? Have some 3s.
Alyssa, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Tom Abood here. Can we use this recording to further educate our own groups and on the process?
Yes, you definitely can. And we will send it out afterwards. We'll post it on YouTube and send out a link. And then we'll also send out the presentation link so you can share that
Great.
And yeah, so I think, Sophia, I see that you were in a room by yourself.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Her too. Maybe everyone who is left, I assume, are people who don't want to join a room, or maybe the rooms didn't work. So if you would like me to add you to a room, raise your hand. If not, we could just kind of do a little brief one. Okay, Sophia, let me add you to one with more people.
Yeah, I got tired of looking at myself, so
Yeah, sorry about that. I think
that's all right.
some people didn't want to do it, so we'll just work with it. It's totally fair. Tom, could I put you and Sophia in a room together?
Could do that.
Okay. So you're both going to go to room 26.
And thank you for doing this, Alyssa. I know it's a lot of work to monitor that many breakout rooms. I just wanted to, yeah, Heidi, I don't think we put you in one, if that was okay. I did see, Suzanne, your question about sample testimonials. So I wanted to maybe touch on that really briefly and just say again that when Lucy, after we finish with our breakout rooms, will sort of give us a bit of a sample testimonial that may be helpful. And I think that, again, this is a very, your testimony and your own story is very personal. So, we love to view it as, hey, here's some ideas that we can, give you about things to talk about and like ways to approach these issues. But ultimately, it's a very personal thing, and there's no like set guidelines for how to come up with your story of self and your testimony. So we just encourage people to look back and find those watershed moments that were important to them and use that as a basis, to come up with effective testimony, or what you're going to write to your legislators. So I hope that helps a little bit. I know it's a little bit vague, but I really just want to stress that there isn't a template. I don't think any of us at 350 have anything drawn up, to help people. I would encourage people, to go to committee hearings and listen to other people's testimony. Absolutely, and that can help. But ultimately, it's definitely a personal thing.
Yes, thank you, Valley, for that. Well, it looks like everyone that wanted to be in a breakout room is anyone that's here in the main room wanting to hear a little story of self idea or thoughts on it, or are you all just kind of waiting to re-enter?
I'd love to hear one.
Okay. I guess, well, we'll have Lucy's, which will be a great one. I last year testified for the first time, and it was really scary, and I got really nervous, and Kate helped me write something out, and I used, it was a fracking bill, and I used my experience that I used to work at in early intervention with children with disabilities, and had some family members that had to leave their home and move away or couldn't afford to, and ended up being just stuck with potential contamination for a fracking site near their school. So I was able to kind of just take that story and use it as why it mattered to me and why I had a personal experience with it that really affected me and stuck with me forever. But I loved how Valley said, like, anything, like even going on, a hike in a national park or seeing a wildfire near your community can be the root of a story of self. And I know, Suzanne, you're a writer, so it'd be really wonderful to see what you come up with this. Anyone else have one they'd like to share?
I think we got some people coming back. Yeah, Alyssa, I don't know if you wanted to send out a message and just maybe close the breakout rooms in 60 seconds. We're doing great on time. We're right on schedule.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
amazing.
perfect.
All right, yeah, it looks like everyone has 60 seconds and get ready for Lucy.
Right, welcome back, everyone. I know we're still filtering back into the main room. Just two quick reminders as people come back in to please, as you enter back into the main room, I know a lot of you are probably still unmuted from your previous rooms. We just kindly ask you to mute yourselves again, please. And also, if you haven't yet, please let us know who your legislator is in the chat. I know some people joined us a bit later, so just really helpful for us to get that information.
Like, if everyone could mute, we might be getting a little bit of feedback. But thank you all for bearing with us with the breakout room technology. It's kind of a bit of a messy one, but hopefully it worked and you got to connect with someone. And yeah, as Valley was just saying, once again, if you could add your legislators in the chat, that will just help us organize our follow-up. And we will dive back in. So now we're going to hear a wonderful, very well practiced story of self that highlights a lot of environmental justice and legislation with Lucy Molina. And actually, Lucy, I'm going to pin you. I don't think you need this slide. Better see your face.
Am I ready? Am I next?
Yep, you are up.
All right. So buenas tardes. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to speak. And I want to thank 350, Lisa, Valley, and everyone that organized this. This is a great presentation. I wish I had all this knowledge years ago before I started doing all this. Maybe I could have done it sooner, but for those that don't know me, my name is Lucy Molina. I am a mom here in Commerce City. I'm a resident and now definitely an advocate, and I fight environmental racism here in my community. As many may know, I have heard, I live next to the oil refinery Suncor, and it's been on the news a lot lately of their blowouts and their shutdown, I guess. And this is where my story starts right here. You know, my family has been impacted by many health impacts. I've shared my story many times that, like, my grandmother passed away of leukemia. And I said to myself, I'm not gonna cry. I'm gonna try not to cry, but sometimes this, you know, I get coraje, we say in Spanish, right? I get a little bit angry and hurt for the situations that our families and our communities have been going through for the last 30 to 50 years. We have been leukemia. My auntie, the same year in 2018, passed away from diabetes. My son has the bloody noses, my daughter bloody noses and migraines. My nephew has asthma. A lot of my family members are impacted. My mother has diabetes. My auntie right now, we are fighting cancer, breast cancer, for the last 6 years. It's become a norm here in our community. at first I thought it was maybe some kind of brujeria, we said in Spanish, right? Some kind of voodoo or the evil eye, but I was sitting at the state capitol, and I'm gonna, thank Mike Foot, Senate, at that time, our representative, also Mike Foot, for bringing forth Senate Bill 181, which is one of the first times I got to testify and advocate for my family, to protect the health and safety of my community. Living next to the oil refinery, I figured like, wow, after so many years, nobody really has ever cared for us. It was not just me when I started organizing, going door to door with a lot of you guys that are on this call, and my family and neighbors. It wasn't just me. Okay, it was also, I thought my situation and my family impacts were bad. My neighbors were suffering for worse things, from heart conditions, from brain cancer. A 30-year-old man that had just his first child was scared because he's like, hey, Lucy, I'm not sure if I'm gonna make it. It's brain cancer. He lives like behind the oil refinery. So these, it started getting to me like, what can I do? What can I do? Two things I could do: run away. Like, people tell me, just get out of here, move if you don't like it. It's easier said than done, first of all. And again, my kids were like, we're going down with the ship. Why would I leave my community here in this poisoned area without doing anything? We need to fight back. We have no drinking water in Commerce City. Our air is contaminated and our soil is contaminated. We are, again, home to the biggest polluter in the state. We are here in the south of Commerce City. We also have fracking up in the north, and also up in Aurora, we have 150 wells that are pending here or just got approved. So that to me is a form of environmental injustice, environmental racism, because most of these communities are low income, Black and brown communities. Mine in particular is a low income and highly Latino community, an immigrant community that cannot advocate for themselves. We are in a climate crisis, and I 100% believe that these climate crisis has begun in communities like ours, in communities like Commerce City, not only here in the state of Colorado, but nationwide and worldwide. So I advocate now for just transition for my community. Don't leave us behind, leaving nobody behind. And it's these communities like mine that are generally left behind always. That is part of my story. We have 1 minute here. I'm trying to stick to the time. They told me I have 5 minutes, and humanize the situation. At this time, the law and the legislation have been always in favor of industry and corporations and special interest. It's time that we put the people first. And yes, this is my story. I think, am I good here in time, Valley?
Yeah, you're doing great. We actually allowed more time and gave you 10 minutes. I mean, I know.
Oh, really?
You've got a lot to say. We're actually right on schedule right now. We're perfect. We had you ending in like.
I tend to talk a lot, as you guys know me. They told me 10 minutes. I was like, okay, I have maybe 5 to 10 minutes. Okay. But I would like to say that before I started advocating for my community, I didn't know where to go. I didn't know how to reach my legislators, my representatives. My own representatives that I reached out to at that time told me there was nothing they could do. And these people already had a seat at the table, I'm saying, right? So I figured, man, if these people have a seat at the table and they can't do anything, then what can I do? I'm just a mom in Commerce City here. Then you become a little bit hopeless until, of course, meeting wonderful people and coalitions like 350 Colorado, and some of the organizations that have been able to partner up with throughout these years have empowered me and have allowed me to better properly advocate for my community, not only at a local level, at a state and federal level. I personally see the urgency. And the sad part, when I mentioned that my family has been impacted in my community, that we're facing leukemia, deadly diseases, cancers, it's very heartbreaking to know that that is my future, and that is the future of my children and the future of most of the community here. We have the lowest performing district in the state right now, in Adams 14. We are attacked by laws that do not apply to our communities, right? I feel sometimes that we are attacked. I always say I had no choice but to step it up and fight back, because World War III showed up in my front yard. You know, I have Suncor here blowing it at us. We have fracking over here. They're attacking, privatizing our education in our district, trying to charter this district. And it's like, wow, man. And these are my children that they're attacking. So when it comes to a parent, you know, you don't mess with my kids. You no te metas con mis hijos porque, you know, it's on. And, you know, at the end of the day, we need to, I tell people, don't wait for me, please. I waited too long. I'm just a mom, really. I'm just a mom trying to do what's right. And I hope also all our legislator and political leaders at every level start putting people first, and begin to bring environmental justice, because we have faced environmental racism for way too long. Yeah, so that is part of my story there. Thank you for the time, Valley, Elissa, 350 Colorado, and everyone that organized this, for all the speakers, and everyone here. Thank you for being here. And I am here in Commerce City, mi casa, su casa. You're welcome to come anytime and visit me. Muchas gracias, and God bless you very much.
Thank you so much, Lucy.
Bye.
Always an inspiration. Get us all ready to participate, and just appreciate you and your passion so much. All right, so we will dive in. We just wanted to briefly go over the 350 plan for this legislative session, just to get you a little bit of an idea of how we will be organizing ourselves, and to get you thinking on where you want to plug in. So we are dividing ourselves this session into topic areas. These areas are definitely not all encompassing or conclusive. They will probably shift as the session moves forward. But this is really just a way for us to kind of divide and conquer, so that we have a place to place all the bills that we're looking at, and you can have a team that you're working with that's not, you know, the 30 people in a committee meeting, and connect on certain bills. So these are the areas that we've kind of divided the bills into so far. Like I said, they might shift, but our advice right now is just to look over these and see what you're inspired by. What do you care about? What do you have personal experience with? What do you think is the most important? Just, you know, there's definitely a lot of bills that will fall into multiple categories, but we might put it in one just so that it has a team to support it. If you are able to type into the chat what of these areas interest you, it'll just give us an idea of where we're all laying right now in terms of interests and how to divide ourselves, and just be a helpful way for you to have an exercise in consideration of what sticks out to you and what, you know, matters to you in the realm of climate legislation. So I'll leave it up for just 1 second for people to type those interest areas into the chat. And no worries if you have a really strong interest area that you don't see up here, type that into the chat too. That would be really helpful for us to see. Let's see the chat, they're all rolling in. Thank you for adding them. Awesome. Thank you so much for adding those. That's so helpful for us. And I'm going to move forward, but keep adding them or adding whatever interest areas you might have. So the way that we will use these to divide and conquer is that each topic area will have a team with hopefully a few members at least, and a team captain, hopefully. And the team captain will just be part of the team, but they'll have a little bit more responsibility. So think about if that sounds like something you're excited about doing. You will just be coordinating a little bit for those priority areas. You will be making sure that someone is available to testify when testimony comes up and be able to step up and cover if no one on your team is able to. You will also update the bill info notes for the whole legislative committee when we meet every other Monday. And then you might be on the lobby core yourself if you're really excited to dive in and do in-person testimony as well, or make sure that the lobby core member is prepared and has all the information they need. This might be creating fact sheets, and obviously the internal 350 team will be supporting all of this and part of this process to help you succeed in this, however that looks. And so the other way we'll divide is that we'll have a lobby core. You all saw Mike Foote present earlier, and he has offered to be an on-site lobbyist at the Capitol to support a lobby core. So we're hoping to get like 5 to 10 in-person testimony people that are willing to go down to the Capitol and testify for their certain bills that they're excited about. And they will do what we just did, that story of self, to prepare and present testimony when bills are being heard. They'll also help to create those fact sheets and update the legislative committee on how the hearings went. They'll advise us on next steps, and then also, collaborate with Mike Foote with on-site support to make sure that they feel comfortable and ready to testify. And we hope in general, whether or not you want to be in one of those teams or in the lobby core or a team captain, we will love your support and love your collaboration with us to just participate. You can even just join committee meetings if that's how you want to plug in. We'll be providing you with education and analysis on the bills that we are focusing on, hopefully plain language fact sheets to explain the bills so that they're easy to understand, easy to see how they will apply to you and change the Colorado climate. Do more education like this throughout the session. We hope to identify and uplift priority bills. We have 3 to 4 bills that we're working on internally with 350, which you'll hear about in a little bit. And then also there's so many other wonderful relevant environmental bills that we will be monitoring and focusing on. We're trying to focus on a few bills so that we can direct our resources and not spread ourselves too thin, but also follow other ones that are important. And just make sure that we're covering all environmental legislation in Colorado and what matters to you all, really. So we will also create a Google Doc and email groups for each of those teams so that there's an easy way for you to share and disseminate information. And the team captains will help assist with that. So now we will dive into, and I think we mentioned this, but we will have time later for Q&A at the end. So definitely don't worry if you have questions, we will hopefully get to them and can also follow up after this with that. But we are going to dive into the 350 Colorado bills that we are focusing on right now, just to get a brief overview and get you all inspired for this session. And first up, we have Giselle talking about para.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alyssa. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here. So I'm here to talk about para. I am the Defunding Climate Disaster Campaign Coordinator with 350 Colorado. So leading our divestment campaigns. And one of our major divestment campaign topics is to try and get Colorado's pension fund, para, to divest from fossil fuels. So very exciting news. We've actually got 2 bill topics that we're supporting this year. And they target para's fossil fuel investments in 2 different ways. So first of all, for those who are new to this topic, what problems does this legislative effort seek to solve? Well, a recent report that is just now coming out, or a recent report from last year, found that Colorado's para has over $2 billion invested in fossil fuel companies, which we can all agree. I don't think I need to expand on why that is not a good thing. A 2019 Corporate Knights study found $1.77 billion was actually lost by Para from not divesting from fossil fuels in the last decade. And this report is just coming out. It's a new study by Corporate Knights that was commissioned by Boulder County that found that Para lost $2.7 billion. So that's a $1 billion increase in losses just in the last 3 or 4 years. They could have had $2.7 billion more dollars if they had divested from fossil fuels in the last decade. And just a quick plug, I'm going to drop something in the chat if you would like to learn more about this. I will be hosting a presentation this Thursday at 5:30 p.m. with Corporate Knights, where we'll be going over the report and the findings from this study. So please attend that, share the results, and you can learn more there. And there's also stranded asset risk to consider. Basically, if we are to stay within our emissions reduction goals and prevent the worst of the climate crisis, a lot of current reserves need to stay in the ground, which means that the value of fossil fuel companies will plummet rapidly, and fossil fuel companies are not adjusting their business models to account for this. And so there is a potential that very rapidly there will be a dramatic loss in the value of these fossil fuel investments, which would be very, very harmful to Para members financially. So just a quick overview of our two bill topics. Next slide, please. So the first thing that we're supporting is a Para climate risk assessment. This is one piece of a broader bill to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Colorado, which is being introduced by Senator Chris Hansen. I believe as of today it's been introduced or is being introduced shortly after. And this bill does several things, one of which is to require the Para board to adopt proxy voting procedures that ensure that Para's votes align with and support statewide greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. And it'll also require Para to publish a public climate risk assessment for their investment portfolios. It also requires insurance companies to publish climate risk assessments. In addition to these pieces, it also does a lot of amazing things like strengthen the greenhouse gas reduction targets to 100% instead of 90% by 2050, with interim goals to keep us on track. So 65% by 2035, 80% by 2040, and 90% by 2045. It also gives the COGCC, the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, authority over dry and abandoned wells that could be used for greenhouse gas sequestration. It establishes a state income tax credit to incentivize electric powered instead of gas powered lawn equipment, and a whole bunch of other things. It does a ton, and it is being introduced by Senator Hansen. If you're interested in supporting this bill, any of the pieces or all of the pieces, you can join the bill lobbying team. You can testify in support of this bill. We are especially looking on both of these bill topics, especially looking for the voices of Para members and people who know Para members. Your voice is going to be especially influential in moving the needle on these Para pieces. So please reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat. Reach out to me if you are interested in getting involved. And then the other bill topic is Para fossil fuel divestment. And just a quick background, in 2019, a bill was introduced by Representative Sirota that would require Para to divest from fossil fuels. In 2020, the Para divestment bill was almost introduced again because it wasn't able to move, or it wasn't able to pass in 2019. And it was unable to move forward in 2020 because of COVID-19. So it was reintroduced in 2021, but again, did not pass. But what the bill would do is it would require the Para board to create an exclusion list of all fossil fuel companies that they're currently invested in. And then the board would be required to determine whether divestment from these companies complies with their fiduciary obligations. And then they would be required to divest all their funds from companies on the exclusion list and cease any new direct investments in these companies. So we have a lot of forward movement on this bill. We're still looking for a legislator willing to be the primary sponsor on the bill, although we have some fantastic leads and we have potential co-prime sponsors currently in the House and the Senate, and we do have the language from the previous bills that were introduced. So what you can do on this bill, reach out to your legislators, particularly if you have an established relationship with them, and let them know that you support Para divestment and you would love to see them support this bill. And fingers crossed, when this gets introduced, we'll definitely need help on the lobbying and testimony side. And I will hand it over to Heidi.
Hi, everybody. Before I start, I'm just going to drop in the chat a link to a new report that just came out. You might have seen it in our statewide email, but this report offers some really good backup for why we need the following two bill concepts. The first one is that we want to be able to support oil and gas workers and communities as we phase out and away from using oil and gas and towards renewables. This CFI report shows county by county which counties are dependent on oil and gas, and 9 out of 64 counties more than 10% of their property taxes from oil and gas. So that's not a lot of the counties, but those counties will definitely need some help as we transition. There are 20,000 direct oil and gas workers right now. And just to put that in perspective, currently we have a just transition office that supports coal workers and communities, but there's only about 1,300 coal workers. Now, if this transition is gradual and managed, it should be manageable because all of those 20,000 oil and gas workers will not be out of work all at once. So it will be gradual. Right now, there is not actually a bill that will expand the just transition office to cover oil and gas workers, because this will need to be done in a step-by-step process over several years. So currently the bill that's underway has a sponsor, Rep. Judy Amabile. And instead of expanding the office, what it will do is it will study how to support oil and gas workers and communities, and also possibly other workers and communities that are impacted by our response to climate change. Rep. Amabile has consulted with the Just Transition Office and labor groups and the governor's office in order to arrive at this concept and this first step in the process towards supporting oil and gas workers and communities. It's possible that it might not actually be under the Office of Just Transition in the future. It might end up under the Office of the Future of Work. Our next steps will be to offer some support and research to Rep. Amabile to see what kind of funding is out there and to encourage her to make sure that there's somebody in government that will be able to apply for those funds and to be able to help the private sector apply for those funds. So this bill is the first stage in a multi-year process. I hope I'm doing okay on time. I think I'm ready for the next slide.
You're doing great, Heidi. Yeah.
So this next one, it really isn't actually a phase out of oil and gas by 2030. I wish, but it's really a little more politically feasible. It's still a really heavy lift to get any of our legislators to try to put something out there to even phase out permitting for new wells. But that's what this one is about. This CFI report also shows that this is really feasible because oil and gas, contrary to what the oil and gas industry says, is only really a very small part of our economy. So current law does say that we must do our part to keep global warming under 1.5 degrees Celsius. And the UN Environment Program and the International Energy Agency both say that we need to slow down production now and stop any new fossil fuel development if we want to achieve that goal. So our concept is that the law would require the COGCC to promulgate rules to gradually reduce the annual number of new permits to drill, and then to specify that they would approve no new permits to drill after December 31st, 2029. And by phasing out new permits, this would lead to a decline in production because wells run dry very quickly. They produce the most in their first 5 to 6 years. And then COGCC would still have plenty of work to do as they continue regulating and enforcing current wells as they gradually run dry. And then they would transition to monitoring, plugging, and remediating the approximately 50,000 currently active wells. So just like the Just Transition bill, we're not quite sure if we will be able to find a sponsor to put it forward in the form that we would like. It might be likely that they will first run a study bill that will study how this would be done, how the phase out would happen. So that's where we are at right now. There are a couple of people who are interested in this concept, but we don't have anyone committed to do it yet.
All right. Thank you so much, Heidi. That was so informative as always. And everyone stay tuned. You can also join Heidi's climate policy meetings that are on, I think once a month on Mondays as well at 5 o'clock. Everything is on our 350 calendar. So you can always just go there and join any of these things. And similar to what Giselle was saying with Para, if you care about these topics, definitely reach out to your legislators and just let them know. It's good to get the conversation going, whether they're ready and willing to sponsor or not. It's good for them to know how many of their constituents care about this stuff. And let us know if you want support and how to do that. So we just wanted to give you a little sample of upcoming bills. We work with the CCLC and other climate organizations and allies to gather the bills that we are all looking for sponsors for and supporting. And this is just a brief list, not by any means all conclusive, but of bills that we know will be happening this session. So you can start taking a look or keeping an eye out for them. Incentivizing electric vehicles, life cycle of water used in oil and gas operations, promoting agrivoltaics, biochar and well plugging and drilling operations, air quality bill, carbon reduction leadership act, managing dynamic generation, enhancements to Buy Clean Colorado, environmental standards for certain products. We did have permission before this meeting to share a little more about the biochar bill. That will be Senator McCormick, and I believe it will be a group to make recommendations for the development of a pilot program to study the use of biochar in the plugging of oil and gas wells. So that one's a really exciting, a lot of potential unfracking bill is what some are calling it. So keep your eyes out for more info on all of those. And now we'll do a brief look at how to read a bill with Valley, just so that you know when these bills start getting introduced, how to read them and understand them.
Awesome. Thanks, Alyssa. I think when you downloaded this, you included the slides that we were going to skip past. So I think we can skip forward a few slides. Yeah, some of this information is redundant. We wanted to keep it simple. We wanted to just be cognizant of the time and not keep anyone here like perfect. So this is where we were going to start. And this may be information that some of you know already, but we wanted to make sure that we touched on it at least briefly. So in our work, the Colorado General Assembly website is definitely like one of our best friends, and so much information here that's updated and just a great way to track legislation. So if you want to go to the website itself, easy to find, just type in the search bar there that has the arrow on it, and you know the topic, the bill number, any keywords that should point you in the right direction and allow you access to all the information you need about a bill. And Google's great as well. If you really know anything, you can type in a Google search and put in keywords, and put Colorado, and it should take you first and foremost to the Colorado General Assembly website on the first link. Next slide, please, Alyssa. And then as far as the bills themselves, this page over here on the left is kind of an example of what most bills will look like. And the section there with that top arrow is just the bill summary, and that should give you a great overview of the topic and what the bill is about and what it wants to accomplish and all of its features and sections. So that's a really great place to start. And if you are, for example, writing like a one sheet, like a fact sheet about a bill, you can start there, but you may want to go down to number 2 and look at like the full bill text. And just forewarning, bill text can be dense, but it can also be really useful if you really want to dive into the nitty gritty and see what a bill is all about. And you can also see the fiscal note to see how much the bill is going to cost. And this page doesn't show it, but as you would scroll farther down, you would get to see information about where the bill is at in its legislative process that Meg talked about earlier. And also if any amendments have been added to the bill, you can see them there. And just wanted to note that often this page isn't always exactly up to date when you're looking at a bill. So just be aware of that. And sometimes you'll go in and you'll see the summary has like strike throughs some of the words, and that often means that the language was changed due to an amendment. So just things to be aware of, and you'll definitely use these pages a lot, especially if you're in the lobby corps and you're in a team captain role. So I want to go ahead and hit the next slide. That is pretty much everything that we have, and we're doing pretty good on time here. Just wanted to wrap up and let everyone know that we will be following up with the people here in the meeting, and just wanted to stress that we have some great things coming up, like Climate Lobby Week and upcoming Legislative Action Committee meetings that we would love everyone to be a part of. So we want to send info out on all of that, and follow up with everyone about scheduling meetings with your legislators. And if you're interested in doing that and finding a time, to get to the Capitol, and we're here to provide support in that, and also help you find your team. And thank you so much for putting your information in the chat about what everyone was interested in, because that's super, super helpful and helps us like organize and get everyone in a role that we feel they'll be most effective in and is enjoyable to them. So yeah, it looks like we have about 3 minutes left. And again, just want to say thank you so much for everyone that showed up here, and all of the presenters and the speakers, and all of you for taking this time on a Monday night to sit with us. We're really excited about the upcoming session and doing some great work. So some of you will probably have to leave, and that's totally okay. But if you do have any questions, I know that I will be sticking around, and Alyssa will be sticking around, and we're happy to answer. So if you are taking off, thank you again. It's great to have you here, and we'll say good night, and feel free to stick around if you need to.
Thank you. And also we will be recording the questions that people did put earlier in the chat that we didn't get to earlier, and include that in the follow-up email if you did ask a question. But feel free to type something in the chat or unmute yourself and ask if you have some burning question right now. Thank you, Giselle. It also made my Monday that much better. It's just so inspiring to see so many people showing up and caring. Really, really appreciate it.
Great job, guys.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Ask.
I love you guys. I'm just so grateful that I have access to this group. It keeps me totally hopeful and engaged.
Oh, thank you for being here.
Anyway,
That para study, it is, I believe it's an independent study with Boulder County. Is that true, Giselle?
Yes, I just saw that question in the chat. So the para study has been commissioned by Boulder County, and the research firm that has been commissioned to do the study is called Corporate Knights, and they are an energy research firm, but it is an independent study.
Awesome. And looks like Frank has his hand raised.
Yes, I do. I was wondering if anyone could comment while we're still all together on the relative value of taking the time to appear in person to give testimony in committee meetings, hearing early hearings on bills versus submitting written testimony to those committee hearings. The relative value, because for me to travel from Fort Collins to the Capitol, it's an all-day event to give a 5-minute oral testimony, whereas I can get that same testimony content communicated in written testimony with an hour of my time.
Yeah, that's a great question, and one we get a lot. And I think no testimony is bad testimony. It's all important and it all is needed. So whatever you can do. We have heard a lot of feedback from legislators and internal people that it's really helpful and effective to be in person. I think that they just get a little worn out watching the screen for hours and hours, but if what you can do is written testimony or waiting to testify online on Zoom, that's also super helpful. The Zoom option is kind of a good in between, because then you still have to wait through the whole thing, but you can show your face and it's a little more personal. But yeah, it's I think it's doing whatever you can is the best. Any other thoughts on that, Valley?
Yeah, I was just going to support what you said, Alyssa, that I think the Zoom option is a great one, Frank. And if you're here on Zoom today, and if you're able to make a Zoom, committee meeting, I went to lots of committee meetings in the last session, and just as powerful in a lot of ways as being there in person. And I know it's a great use of technology to make your voice heard. I tend to lean in what Alyssa said in that direction, is that if you are able to do Zoom or in person, that's definitely, like, I think, the preferred method as opposed to written testimony. But if you want to, do, written testimony, it's certainly not a bad thing. And yeah, and I just saw that Mike put in the chat that in person is best if possible. So I think that's the consensus with all of us, but definitely Zoom is great too. Thanks for the question. Anyone else have any questions, thoughts? Looks like Ruth does. Go ahead, Ruth.
Okay, so my big problem is that they're all interesting, or I should say important things to get past. Though I'm always very disappointed in how slow all of these things are and how little we can even ask for, when what we really need is even bigger changes than what I'm seeing here. And so I guess my question is, is it better to just pick one thing and try and do that well? Or, right at the moment, I probably sign, I don't know how many petitions a week. And I do write letters a lot. And sometimes they're the formed ones, but usually if it's something I really care about, which unfortunately there's way too many things I really do, they get personalized to at least some extent, to the point where I actually do occasionally get real letters back from even national senators. But I guess my question is, what do you think is the most effective thing that I could be doing? I mean, seriously, I have been trying to disinvest myself for a long time, and I have made as much, on that front as I can do without actually pulling my money and going elsewhere, which I actually have done in the past. And I've done everything I possibly can at home, or as much as I could afford anyway, EV, solar arrays, battery backup, grow my own food and all that kind of stuff. But I guess I'm trying to find out because I don't actually have infinite amounts of time.
No, that's a great question, Ruth. And I think give yourself a lot of credit, because you're doing a lot, and that's really important to not burn out and value everything you're doing, how important it is. I'd say, in light of what we've been talking about tonight, like Ron just said, your voice as a para member is so important, and cultivating those relationships with your legislators, even if it's emailing them and telling them why you care about divesting from para, seeing if they're willing to meet with you, joining the constituent group that we'll create through the next steps of this meeting to meet with them during Climate Lobby Week, so that they know you care about this and that you are a constituent. I think would probably be the most effective next thing.
I mean, I do know Rachel.
Oh, you do? Awesome.
I mean, I've actually sat across the table from her. And she actually responds to my emails. Sometimes I get her help first, but usually about a week later, I'll get a real answer from her. Because I remind her about things. that she should know. And, you know, she's really proud of that. You know, I've got 100% on my environmental, blah, 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 blah. But, you know, yeah, I don't know.
Anyone else have thoughts for Ruth? It sounds like connecting with Giselle might be helpful on the para stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, and by all means, Giselle, but Ron said your voice as a para member is important, and I 100% agree. Go ahead, Giselle.
Yeah, just ditto to what they said. Yeah, we're definitely in need of para members to not just testify, but even have conversations with other para members. A lot of para members just are not aware of the effort to get para to divest from fossil fuels. So I saw your email, Ruth, and I will definitely reply and let you know some more information. I'm seeing a few other people reaching out as well. So yeah, just broadly, if you're interested in taking action on the para campaign, if you know para members, if you are a para member, if you just are interested and have nothing to do with para but are supportive, we could definitely use your help. So I'll drop my email in the chat again, and yeah, just thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Any other questions before we sign off?
I saw that Earl had your question there in the chat, which I think is a really good one and aligns well with the work that Giselle is doing to talk more about para, Giselle. But I mean, I think it sets this precedent of, yeah, I mean, we're trying to make it so more people understand that there is we have a vested economic interest in moving away from fossil fuels. And by getting behind the kind of work that Giselle is doing with para and seeing that like divestment is, it's going to make you money in the long run, and it's better for the environment. It's better for our public health. I mean, those are all important things to stress. So I'm just saying that it's a very similar concept. I know you talked about it from a bank perspective, but just wanted to say that I think there's a precedent for that, and what you're talking about is actively being worked on. Did you have other thoughts, Earl?
Yeah, I asked the question that because these bills seem to be set and we don't yet have a bill sponsor for a public bank, one of these bills could be amended, and by having making a study to look at how a public bank could greatly expand the funding for clean energy. An example is in Germany, the publicly owned banks in that country, 1,500 cities with many more branches, have been able to greatly increase the conversion to clean energy from fossil fuels, greatly accelerate that from 2002 to 2020, from 6% to over 50% of their energy. And the same thing could be done here.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. And I think Heidi brought up a good point in the chat about Mike, if you're still available and interested, you could speak to that, because I was thinking this is a great idea, Earl, that maybe you could bring as a bill concept or a bill idea yourself to a legislator and discuss it as an option. As Mike said, you know, that's happened before when constituents have come to their legislators and said, you know, do you want to do this? And then it's turned into, you know, actual legislation. But yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Oh, right. So the question is, what is it that you can do about public banks, or what is it you can do about Suncor or amending legislation? I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand what you were wanting to know.
It was kind of both. It was two questions. Earl was talking about amending one of the bills to do a study of how public bank could make more money converting to clean energy. And then it looks like Paul above also had a question about what the legislator can do about Suncor.
Okay.
Maybe.
Well, so first of all, about the amending bills, one thing, bills get amended all the time. But one thing to remember about bills getting amended is that it has to fit under the title. So each bill will have a title that'll say concerning oil and gas operations. That would be a super broad title and probably wouldn't be the title, but let's assume that it is. You could not probably amend that bill to say something about public banking, unless you could make an argument that that relates to the bill title concerning oil and gas operations. So you have to look at the title closely and see what the title says, and any amendment that you would have in mind would have to be relevant or fit under the title, as they say. So secondly, about Suncor, there actually have been things that legislators have proposed as well as passed over the last couple of years that relate to major sources like Suncor. They don't specifically call out Suncor because you're not supposed to have legislation that just deals with one thing. But they deal with major sources like Suncor and curbing those types of emissions related to what Suncor and others spew out during their operations. So that has happened and it'll continue to happen. I think there's ways to put in legislation things that the Air Quality Control Commission can do to tighten up those regulations and just keep moving along the lines of reducing or eliminating emissions that would come from facilities like Suncor. That's clearly within the legislature's power to do. Whether or not a bill would get passed and signed by the governor is always the big question, but certainly there can be laws written that would deal with those effects.
Thank you, Mike. Very helpful. All right. Any other questions? Looks like we might be ready to wrap it up for the evening. Feel free to email us with questions. Oh, Frank, you had. Oh, you're muted.
So one last question. What other bills beyond electric vehicle focus do you see coming forward that will be addressing building electrification?
Ron, are you still here?
Okay.
I'm an architect, so I follow this stuff pretty closely. There were a lot of bills last year about building electrification. There's the Colorado Energy Office right now has put together a building energy code board that's writing or creating a code that will be implemented at different times. First 2025 and then statewide by 2030. This year, I heard about expanding an embodied carbon bill that would encourage or incentivize low carbon building materials. That bill, a bill like that passed a couple of years ago, but it was strictly limited to state-owned buildings, and that would then be expanded to all buildings. I'm not sure what the status of that bill is or whether it's been introduced, but there has been talk about it. But I think just as a general answer to your question, there was so much last year regarding buildings that, you know, we're probably not going to see as much, unless you want to consider like EV chargers for buildings and parking lots. That's one thing. But nothing major this year, I think, for building electrification.
Okay, the reason I think it's a very important question is because with the federal funding for conversion of heating systems to heat pump systems, it seems to me that there's a lot of room here for the state legislation that would provide encouragement to municipals to provide improved flexibility for homeowners that want to make that conversion. Right now, it's extremely difficult. It's extremely painful for someone who lives in a home that is heated by gas to convert to an all-electric home. And I think there are numerous things that could be done that would streamline and make this a much less painful experience for the homeowner that wants to make that conversion.
I hear you, Frank. Absolutely. I think what you'll see is more action at the local level. You need to, because building codes are really determined at the city and municipal level, you're going to see more action from certain municipalities. That's actually going on right now in Denver. As of May, they're going to have a new green building code. So cities are doing their part. I wouldn't hold my breath to see it happen at a state level. There's just a lot of resistance to that, unfortunately.
Thank you, Ron.
Okay, thank you, Frank.
Yeah, thank you. And as Valley said, Enhancements to Buy Clean Colorado has a sponsor. The Pelosi administration is still saying that they're going to be 100% renewable by 2040. That's obviously not involving all of this, but it's also a little bit of hope in that realm. Any other things? I think that we've covered a good amount, and once again, feel free to email us with questions that pop up after tonight. All right, well, thank you for being here. It's so nice to see you all, and thanks for sticking with us to the very end.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Appreciate you.
Bye-bye.
Alyssa, you want to stick around for just a second?
Yeah,
Cool.
make sure we don't lose all this information.